Hi readers, welcome back to the channel Lessons from the Homeroom. Thank you so much for checking in today. We are into our poetry unit right now. So if you haven't seen the first video, please pause right now, go back and check out down below for an additional video to launch you on your poetry journey from reading at home. As we dive deep into poetry, I'd like to start by just explaining 4 different forms of poetry that we're going to explore in each of the following videos. So some of the forms are a narrative form of poetry, a humorous form of poetry, lyrical, and free verse. So just a quick description of each are, in a narrative poem, it often tells us a story, like a narrative story, a narrative writing. So all of that has a common word. It tells us a story. It has characters, a setting, and a plot. So it's going to sound a lot like a picture book maybe. Also, it can have rhyme. Not necessarily, but it can. So that is a narrative poem. It's a story with characters, plot, a setting, and sometimes can rhyme. The next one is humorous poetry. This can be funny or it can be silly, and it can also rhyme. Personally, some of my favorite poems are these humorous ones. A humorous poem is funny, silly, and can rhyme. The next one is lyrical. Lyrical is like a song. It has a lot of rhyme and it expresses a strong feeling in a lyrical poem. So a lyrical poem, as I had mentioned before, is one of those that might turn into a song. A lot of musicians use lyrical poetry to create their rhymes that make it to the airwaves. So it's a song that can rhyme and it often expresses a strong feeling. Lyrical. The last one we're going to talk about throughout the series of our poetry videos is free verse. So free verse is very different. It has no set line length. It has no set rhythm or rhyming. It does not have a pattern. And it is a way to express feeling and ideas. So free verse really hits home to the feelings and the emotions of it, but it doesn't follow any of the rules. It's kind of like a free spirit, but it's called free verse in poetry. So as we continue to read poems throughout this video series, these are the forms that we're going to be talking about. So stay tuned to all of our future videos to learn more about narrative, humorous, lyrical, and free verse poetry. Readers, now's the time to collect a bunch of poetry books if you can. You can go online to a lot of digital resources, visit your public library, search your shelves at home, but now's the time to get about 10 poetry books right there in your reading toolkit so we can explore and try to discover an example of each of these in the books that you have. All right, readers, so now you should have a stack of your poetry books sitting next to you, getting ready for you to read. Today, we're going to dive deep into showing examples of a narrative poem. So remember, a narrative poem is very similar to a story. It has characters, it has a plot, it has a setting. It doesn't always rhyme though. So today I'm going to read you an example, and my challenge for you when you're reading independently is to read multiple poems and see if you can find one that's a narrative poem, one that tells us a story, has characters, a setting, and a plot. So here's my example of a narrative poem. It comes from the book Grasshopper Pie and Other Poems by D.J. Steinberg. It's called Grasshopper Pie. I'm Grandma's favorite helper. You should have seen her eyes when I brought 6 grasshoppers to make grasshopper pies. I knew she'd want a closer look. I opened up the lid. I think those hoppers got confused. They all hopped out and hid. One jumped in the pantry and one jumped in the sink. One jumped into Grandma's cup and tried to take a drink. One went for the chocolate cake, another found the bread, another one liked Grandma. He jumped right on her head. So I'm going to pause right here and let's start to think. Okay, is this telling us a story? I think it is. Does it have characters? Surely it does. It has Grandma, the boy who's telling the story, and he's referred to as I, so he's also the narrator of this poem, or this narrative poem. And I would almost classify these grasshoppers as characters because boy, do they have a role in this story. So the setting is when and where a story takes place. So where are we at? We're at Grandma's house. When, looks like during the day, but it's when the boy wants to come over and help his grandmother make grasshopper pie. All right, so we're understanding now part of the plot. The plot is what happens within the story. So far, we have a boy who's coming over to visit his grandma to make grasshopper pie. She looks totally ready to go to make that recipe. I'm wondering if the boy has a little bit of misunderstanding because I'm wondering if Grandma, based on her picture, is telling us that that's really what's part of the recipe. Do you think grasshoppers are part of the recipe in Grandma's book? I don't know. So the plot is going to continue. The plot is the developing story. So here those grasshoppers escape. So let's pause for a moment and think, what do we predict is going to happen in this narrative poem? Let's keep reading. Grandma sure loves grasshoppers, as I could plainly tell. Why, she got so excited, she gasped and nearly fell. I climbed across the counters and scaled the pantry wall. I hopped and jumped around the room till I had caught them all. And that's when Grandma told me, and my grandma never lies, there really are no grasshoppers inside grasshopper pies. I stood in shock and disbelief. The grasshoppers just sighed. Then Grandma told my grasshoppers to go and play outside. Then she took a pie crust, scooped in some mint ice cream, and made the best grasshopper pie with me on Grandma's team. I'm Grandma's favorite helper. Next day, I came to bake. I brought a bag of marbles to make a marble cake. So, I love how this author wraps it up at the end as well. Thank goodness, I was really worried about that grasshopper in the pie, and it sounds like the grasshoppers were worried too. And it continues by making it very clear that no, the grasshopper part was mint ice cream. That sounds like a much better pie to me. And then it kind of leads us into what might happen the next day. I brought a bag of marbles to make a marble cake. I wonder what's going to happen tomorrow. Do you think it's going to be something similar as it did in our narrative poem? This is a great little poem. This one did happen to rhyme, but like we said, there definitely were characters, there was a setting, and there was a plot to the story. So this is a perfect example of a narrative poem called Grasshopper Pie. So readers, I challenge you today to just read poetry and enjoy all different types at this point and try to identify, can you find any narrative poems in the ones that you read today? So at this time, please pause your video and read for the time that is expected every day of you. When you're done reading for that time, try to bring back a narrative poem as we recap the lesson in just a moment. Press pause and I'll see you soon. Welcome back, reader. I hope you enjoyed reading many wonderful poems in your time of independent read. I personally love this entire book. It's filled with narrative poems, all that are so funny and clever, many of them that are rhyming. But remember, as you read poems that have characters, a setting, and a plot, know that those are narrative poems. Thanks for joining us today, readers, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video as we talk about humorous poems, one of my favorites. So, thanks for checking in. See you in the next one. Enjoy your books.